The night was warm in Miami. The mansion sparkled with imported crystal chandeliers, clinking glasses, fake smiles, and expensive perfume in the air. Suit-clad men tried to hide their ruin behind luxury watches. Women in designer dresses wore perfectly calculated smiles. They were all there for one reason: to charm the future sponsor of their failing companies. But no one knew who she was. No one recognized Emily. Wearing a simple dress and her hair down, she walked among them like a shadow, stared at like she didn't belong. The jokes started as whispers, then came the laughter. "Lost, sweetheart? This isn't a charity event." She tried to speak, but no one let her. The more she spoke, the louder they laughed. They tried to kick her out. They shouted. They shoved. But what they didn't know was that they were spitting on the plate they hadn't even eaten from yet. And the plate was hers. The party was hers. Their future tea was hers too. Have you ever been judged by your appearance? Have you ever tasted the bitterness of injustice? Leave a comment and get ready. This story will leave you speechless. It was late afternoon in Miami, and the Moore mansion was more alive than ever. The historic facade, with its neoclassical columns, glowed gold under the spotlights. The front gate swung open again and again for luxury cars, each one dropping off hurried, smiling businessmen. Inside, waiters glided like dancers, the orchestra was warming up, and the air was filled with the scent of lavender and champagne. But the one person who truly mattered had yet to be introduced. Emily stood at the front gate, no chauffeur, no jewelry. She wore a plain blue dress with no visible designer label. Her eyes, steady, took in every detail of the garden decorated with Greek statues. Her heart was pounding. This was her night. Not to be praised, but to see for herself who truly deserved her trust. She approached the grand staircase like any other guest, and no one realized that the fate of everyone inside was in her hands. In the main hall, crystal lights danced across powdered faces. Guests mingled between the lavish salons and the garden, laughing loudly, greeting each other with theatrical hugs. Sarah Van Dorn, dressed in gold, surveyed the scene with the air of someone who owned the party. Beside her, Ethan, an executive in the pharmaceutical industry, was sweating, laughing too hard, trying to mask the panic of his crumbling empire. They were both anxiously awaiting the arrival of the mysterious heiress. Emily stepped into the room, taking a deep breath. Her eyes searched for Michael, the butler, her only ally that evening. But he wasn't there. She moved through the crowd like a piece out of place on the board. A waiter passed by without offering her a drink. Two men looked her up and down, then turned away as if they'd seen a lost maid. Emily felt the first chill of the night. A nearby group began whispering. "Who is that?" asked a woman wearing a turquoise necklace. "Who did she come with?" added another, frowning. "She looks out of place. Must be someone's assistant." Emily stopped in front of the central sculpture and watched the movement around her. Everything was going exactly as planned. No one recognized her, and this was the perfect chance to see the truth behind the smiles. But something inside her was starting to feel heavy. She took a deep breath, trying to stay focused. At the back of the room, George, a small business owner who ran a sustainable textile factory, stood alone by the cheese table. His worn shoes clashed with the glittering heels all around him. When he saw Emily, his gaze lingered. It wasn't desire, nor judgment. It was recognition, like someone who also knows the invisible weight of not belonging. Emily felt his gaze. She gave a subtle smile. But before she could step closer, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Hey, does anyone know what this woman is doing here?" Sarah was pointing directly at her. Everyone turned at once. The laughter stopped, and so began the most absurd and revealing night in the lives of everyone inside that mansion. The room froze for a moment after Sarah's comment. Emily felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, judging, sizing her up, dismissing her. She kept her head high, but inside, something began to tremble. It wasn't fear, it was a painful recognition. She knew exactly the kind of people she was dealing with, and that's precisely why she had to stay. Sarah approached like a queen on parade, her golden dress glittering under the chandeliers. At her side, Ethan, his elegant blazer hiding the collapse of his company, was drinking too fast, trying hard to look relaxed. "You didn't answer, darling," Sarah said with a venomous smile. "Who invited you to this party?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I wasn't invited. I came by choice." Ethan chuckled, already hazy from his third glass of champagne. "So you snuck in, and you think that's okay? This isn't some happy hour, miss." Emily tried to hold her ground. "Actually, I'm here because this party is for high-level people," Sarah cut in, "not for wannabes. Are you with the catering staff, or just here to pick at the leftovers?" Low laughter rippled through the room. The orchestra's music now seemed farther away, faint and irrelevant. Emily looked around. No one recognized her, just as she had planned. But the sting of being treated like she didn't exist still hurt. In a quiet corner, George, the small business owner with the sustainable textile factory, stood holding a glass of water, quietly watching the scene unfold. His tired but sharp eyes followed every move. When he saw how Emily was being treated, he frowned and slowly stepped forward. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice steady and calm, "but maybe we should give the young lady a chance to explain herself." Sarah rolled her eyes. "George, please, just because you think honesty is elegance doesn't mean the rest of the world agrees. She doesn't belong here. It's that simple." Emily turned to George, grateful for the gesture. "Thank you. You're the first person to actually speak to me since I arrived." George looked at her kindly. "Sometimes people are so busy trying to look important, they forget what it's like to really listen." Sarah scoffed, while Ethan looked Emily up and down with contempt. "This is getting awkward," he muttered. "Someone needs to handle this mess before it turns into a scene." "Oh, it will," Sarah whispered, discreetly signaling to one of the security guards. Emily felt the energy shift. What had been mere discomfort was now turning into hostility. She looked toward the door, no sign of Michael. "He'll be here," she whispered to herself, trying not to lose her nerve. George caught it. "You waiting for someone?" "I am," she replied with a knowing smile. "Someone who might just turn this night upside down." The ballroom felt like a stage, but in this play Emily wasn't the actress. She was the target. The stares were heavy. Fake smiles turned into disgusted grimaces as she walked by. Sarah giggled at every new insult, each one disguised as a casual comment. Emily stood her ground, her posture firm, but her voice still trapped in her throat. The name Emily Moore felt like a bomb, one she wasn't ready to detonate just yet. "I'm starting to feel uncomfortable," whispered a blonde woman, glaring directly at Emily. "We don't even know who she is." "We don't need to know," Ethan replied, his tone sharper now. "Clearly she doesn't belong here. Just look at that dress. Is that cotton?" "Cheap cotton," added Sarah, her smile almost cruel. "She probably doesn't even know what silk is." Up to that point, Emily had stayed silent. But now she took a step forward. "I came here because I needed to see with my own eyes who you really are. What you do when you think someone has nothing to offer." Sarah stared at her, chuckling under her breath. "So you're here to study us? What are you, a social researcher? An influencer? Who gave you permission?" "The most legitimate one there is," Emily replied firmly. "The truth." "This isn't a TED Talk, sweetheart," Ethan scoffed. "This is a business party. For grown-ups. George approached again, still holding a glass of sparkling water. "Leave her alone," he said calmly. "What do you gain by humiliating a woman who's only asking to be heard?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Oh, George, always with your public school speeches. No one here has time for a moral lecture. But you do have time for cowardly jokes, don't you?" George shot back, raising an eyebrow. Emily glanced at him, moved by his quiet courage. But before she could thank him, a waiter walked by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and Sarah had a cruel idea. "Hey, girl," she said, grabbing a tiny tart off the tray. "Since you're so eager to stay, why don't you help out? Go ahead and serve the canapes." She held the tray out to Emily, triggering a wave of laughter around them. Emily looked at her in silence, not moving an inch. "Not gonna take it," Sarah pushed. "I figured serving was more your thing." George stepped in again, this time with a firmer voice. "That's enough, even for you, Sarah. This is low." "What's low is watching some nobody crash a very exclusive event," Ethan shouted. "This has gone way too far." Emily took a deep breath. "I'm more known than you think, just not for the kind of things you value." The laughter died for a second. Sarah clenched her jaw. "If you don't leave now, I'll call security myself. This is turning into a complete circus." Emily looked toward the door once more. Still no sign of Michael. "He's coming," she told herself, "and when he does, nothing will ever be the same." The laughter grew louder as Emily stood still, the tray held out by Sarah like a trophy of mockery. The golden light of the ballroom no longer felt elegant. It now lit up cruel faces and venomous mouths. No one there knew it yet, but that moment of humiliation would be remembered for a long time. Not by those who laughed, but by those who endured. "Well, are you going to take it or not?" Sarah taunted, holding the tray up to Emily's face. "Or are you too good for that too?" Emily didn't move. It wasn't pride, it was resistance. "You're revealing yourselves," she said softly, yet with a sharpness that cut through the air, one by one. Ethan smirked with disdain. "Revealing what? That we're selective? That we like to know who we're dealing with?" "No," Emily replied, "that you only respect people wearing the right kind of armor." Sarah snapped her fingers. A waiter approached. "If you're so eager to serve," she said, shoving the tray into Emily's hands, laughing, "then do it properly. Go on, darling, serve these with dignity." Emily stood there, tray in hand. The entire room was watching. Some laughed openly. Others whispered, casting smug glances. It was the spectacle of disdain. George, visibly shaken, stepped forward. "This is inhumane. You're mocking someone who only asked for the right to be here, and you know nothing about her." Sarah turned to him, masks off now. "George, your company is irrelevant, and now you want to play hero for the underdogs? Please. We all know why you're on her side, because you don't belong here either." "And you do," George shot back, "because money doesn't wash a rotten soul." Silence fell, broken only by Ethan's mocking laugh. How poetic! The mystery poor girl and the wise bankrupt man. You two should start a circus. Emily, still holding the tray, turned slowly. She walked past the group, eyes glassy. But what was shining there wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of something. She stopped near a group of investors who looked at her suspiciously. "Would you like a canapé?" she asked, her voice firm, laced with irony. "Thanks, miss," one of them said, not catching the sarcasm. George came up beside her quietly. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. Emily looked at him, and for the first time that night gave a real smile. "I know. But they need to see themselves for who they really are, and that only happens when no one treats them like royalty anymore." George nodded, eyes misty. "You're stronger than you look." She handed the tray back to the waiter. "And they are smaller than they think." Emily stepped away from the center of the ballroom. The air there was heavier than the simple dress she wore. The tray was gone, but the weight of humiliation still clung to her shoulders, invisible on the outside, pulsing on the inside. Still, she walked with her eyes wide open. She watched. She listened. George followed, walking beside her between marble columns and Italian cherub statues. "Are you sure you want to stay?" he asked quietly. "They're not going to stop. People like this feed off stepping on anyone who stands alone." Emily kept her gaze forward. "I'm not alone. They just haven't seen who's with me yet." George raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Someone's coming." She smiled, mysterious, almost playful. "Yes, and when they arrive, none of this will look as pretty as it does now." They stopped near a table of floral arrangements. The scent of roses filled the air, but beneath the perfume, something sour lingered. Emily picked up a napkin discreetly and pulled a small silver pen from her purse. She started writing. "What are you writing?" George asked, surprised. "Names," she replied without looking up. "Behaviors. Who mocked me, who shoved me, who tried to silence me, sir, and who offered a hand." George nodded, quietly respectful. "You know, I lost everything trying to please people like them. I just wanted them to see the value in what I built. They never did." Maybe because they don't see value," Emily said, glancing around. "Only price." Across the room, Sarah was laughing loudly with a group of businessmen whispering in each other's ears. They still believed Emily was a party crasher, a joke, a shadow. And because of that, they let their guard down. They showed their true faces. Ethan, visibly tipsy, walked past her without noticing, talking loudly to another guest. "The more heiress, I bet she doesn't even exist. This is all theatre. What matters is if she signs the checks," he laughed. "I'm going to find out who she is, and when I do, I'll kiss her damn feet if I have to." Emily wrote down his name. George stood in silence, watching. It was the first time he'd seen someone face that world without raising their voice, without pounding a table, just with memory and dignity. "You're not going to fight back?" he asked gently. Emily replied with calm strength, "I don't fight back. I choose. And by the end of the night, only those who deserve to stand beside me will still be here." George looked at her as if truly seeing someone untouched by that toxic world. "I don't know who you really are, but I know this. I've never met anyone like you." Emily smiled. "And you were the only one here who didn't need to know my name, to treat me with respect. That I won't forget." The night went on, and the guests wandered like vultures drawn to the scent of opportunity. But now all eyes were on Sarah. Wrapped in gold, glass in hand, surrounded by a flock of fake friends, she moved through the ballroom as if she were the host. The reason. A rumor started minutes earlier by a drunk and arrogant Ethan. What if the heiress is someone we already know? Like Sarah? "Of course, that makes total sense," another chimed in. "She's always had access to this world. She's polished, influential." Sarah just smiled, letting the rumor spread like wildfire, and the more it spread, the more businessmen came swarming, bringing proposals, compliments, and sugar-coated lies. From a quiet corner near the indoor fountain, Emily watched it all. The sound of the water muffled the noise of the room. Her hands were still, but her eyes, they were sharpening with every face she studied. "Fascinating, isn't it?" George said as he approached. "They don't know who anyone really is, but they hand out smiles like business cards." Emily didn't take her eyes off Sarah. "They don't care who I am, they only care what I can give." George nodded. "And the worst part? They'd bow down to someone who steps on them, as long as she's wearing the right jewelry. Sarah received yet another ridiculous pitch. "If you invest in my clinic," a man slurred, reeking of wine, "I promise your name will become a national reference." "Of course, darling. Just send everything to my email," Sarah replied, faking grace while hiding the panic of her impending bankruptcy. Emily wrote his name down too, one by one. This was no longer a celebration. It had become a silent screening process. "Have you decided what you'll do with them?" George asked, curious. "I have," Emily replied. "But the final act is still to come. They haven't fallen far enough yet." Outside, stuck in traffic, Michael banged his hand on the steering wheel. "Come on, move," he muttered, sweating. "They're about to do something really stupid." Back at the party, Ethan climbed onto a small improvised stage, champagne in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Sarah Van Dorn," he shouted. "Our inspiration, our future investor." Fake applause echoed through the hall. Emily smiled subtly, her heart calm. "Good. Let them all show who they really are," she said. "It makes it easier to know who deserves my presence when the time comes." George looked at her in awe. "You're going to make history tonight." "No," Emily replied, rising to her feet. "They are. I'm just going to watch the result of their own choices." The cheers for Sarah were still echoing when Ethan, now drunk and overexcited, stepped down from the little stage and pointed at Emily, who stood quietly by the fountain. "You're still here?" he shouted, laughing loudly. "What are you waiting for? The bus?" Everyone laughed, but the laughter wasn't natural. It was poisoned, laced with exhaustion and fear of not pleasing the woman they thought was the heiress. Sarah, and Emily, was nothing more than a pebble in their designer heels. Emily rose slowly. Her eyes no longer wavered. There was pain, yes, but a pain that had begun to harden, forming calluses inside. She looked straight at Ethan. "I'm still here, because this house is mine, and you are my guests." Her voice was calm, steady. 3 seconds of silence, then the room exploded in laughter. "Oh my God!" Sarah clapped her hands as if watching a comedy play. "This is getting ridiculous." Ethan leaned toward her, mocking. "Should I ask her to give us a tour? To the right, the bathroom I scrub every night," he said, cracking up. Emily closed her eyes, holding back the urge to scream. She wanted to shout, but she knew, if she did, they would win. George stepped through the crowd, positioning himself beside her. "Enough. You've crossed every line." Sarah turned to him, full of contempt. "George, you're really going to keep defending this woman? You're willing to throw away what little dignity you have left?" "I've lost contracts, I've lost friends, but I won't lose the last thing I still have, my self-respect," he replied, staring her down. "Touching," Sarah said coldly, "but she's still a trespasser, and trespassers get removed." She raised her hand, and 2 security guards approached, tall, stone-faced. They looked at Emily like she was a threat. The room fell silent again. Some smiled, others just didn't want to get involved. "Please come with us," one of the guards said. Emily lifted her hand. "Wait! Before anything, I need to say something." "Oh, you've said plenty, sweetheart," Ethan snapped. "We've had our drama show for the night. Now leave with some grace, if that word even exists in your vocabulary." "I am Emily Moore," she shouted, "and this party, this mansion, all of this delusion." "Obviously," Sarah cut in, laughing. "What an actress, bravo! Everyone give her a round of applause." The guards reached for Emily's arm. She pulled away. "Don't touch me," she said, voice shaking but firm. "I am the heir to this house, the daughter of Richard Moore, and all of you are going to regret this." The room didn't believe her. They didn't want to believe. "This is mental illness," a woman whispered. "Psychosis." "Seen this before," a man muttered. "Imposter syndrome. Classic." Sarah stepped closer, face to face with Emily. "You know what you are? A desperate nobody begging for attention, and that doesn't deserve our presence." She looked to the guards. "Remove her, now!" George tried to stop them. "She's telling the truth. Look at her eyes." But he was shoved aside. Emily, surrounded, was escorted to the front door. Her steps were heavy, her eyes filled with restrained tears. Outside, the night had turned colder. The gates were half open. Emily was left alone on the front steps, beneath the glowing lights of the mansion. "You'll regret this," she murmured to herself. Out on the road, headlights appeared, fast. A black car. The driver honked repeatedly, frantic. Inside the house, George stood by the door, fists clenched, watching helplessly. Back in the ballroom, Sarah raised another glass. "Now we can enjoy ourselves. The crazy woman is gone." But no, she wasn't gone. Michael had just jumped out of the car. His face tense, his steps urgent, he ran toward the entrance. "Miss Moore?" he shouted, seeing her collapsed on her knees by the stairs. Emily looked up at him. She didn't need to say a word. He ran inside, pale with shock, shouting, "Stop the party! Stop everything! What have you done?" Michael burst through the gates like he was running for his life. Sweat streamed down his forehead, his suit clung to his body, and his eyes were wide with panic. The moment he saw Emily kneeling at the entrance, the panic turned to raw despair. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Miss, what did they do to you?" Emily was breathing heavily, her eyes still wet. But there was something new in them now, strength. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was the silence before the storm. "Oh, they threw me out like garbage." Michael clenched his fists, eyes burning. Without another word, he stood up, furious. "Stay right here. This ends now." He marched through the gates, ignoring the guards who stepped in his way. "I'm the head butler of this estate, and you have just made the biggest mistake of your lives." Inside, the party was still in full swing. Sarah joked into a makeshift microphone. Ethan spun around with a drink in hand, and the guests were back to dancing. The mood was light. The problem had been removed, until Michael's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Stop the music!" The conductor hesitated. Guests turned slowly. "What's this nonsense?" Ethan muttered, frowning. "Sorry, Michael," Sarah mocked, laughing. "You missed your cue for the drama club performance." Michael took a deep breath and shouted, "Did anyone here see a woman wearing a plain navy blue dress, being humiliated, thrown out for not fitting in?" Some exchanged nervous glances. "Well, let me tell you something," he continued. "You just kicked out the owner of this mansion, the heir to the Moore empire. The only reason this party is even happening. She is Emily Moore." A devastating silence fell over the room like a bomb. Glasses slipped from hands, laughter froze on lips, and what followed was just the echo of truth. Sarah's eyes widened. She took a step back. "What? She's... who?" Ethan stammered, nearly choking. Michael moved forward across the ballroom. "The woman you mocked, the one you called poor, crazy, the one you treated like trash, holds the future of every single one of you. And now she knows exactly who each of you are." The room split into two kinds of faces, those in stunned silence, and those already sweating with regret. This is a mistake. It has to be," Sarah stammered. Michael looked at her with pure disdain. "She tried to tell you. You didn't let her. You chose to laugh, to ridicule. And now you'll face whatever she decides." Outside, Emily remained seated, breathing deeply. She could hear the murmurs from inside. George approached, eyes misty. "He said it, didn't he?" "He did," Emily replied, eyes still closed. "But now, there's no going back." Michael rushed back to her. "Are you all right, miss?" I've never been more ready." She rose to her feet. Her hair danced in the night air, her simple dress fluttered gently, but her gaze, that was the only thing anyone needed to see. It was the gaze of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. "The door is open, miss." Emily walked back toward the ballroom like a silent storm, and as she passed through the gates, the ground seemed to tremble. The ballroom, once electric with excitement, now breathed fear. The smiles had vanished. Champagne sat untouched in crystal glasses. Sarah was pale, clinging to the edge of the table as if it could stop what was coming. Ethan sweated beneath his blazer. Other businessmen whispered, searching for a place to hide their guilt. And then she entered. Emily stepped through the gates with steady, deliberate steps, eyes locked on the heart of the party like someone walking through wreckage. She wasn't looking for pity, she was looking for faces, the ones who ignored her, pushed her, humiliated her. The dress was the same, her hair unchanged. Nothing about her had altered, except her eyes. They no longer carried just dignity, but judgment. George followed quietly behind. Michael trailed after her, keeping the room in absolute silence, like a master of ceremonies for the truth. Emily stopped in the center of the ballroom. No one dared breathe too loudly. "So, now you hear me?" she asked, her voice clear. No need to shout, no one answered. Only the gentle trickle of the fountain in the background broke the crushing silence. "When I walked in here, I was ignored. You called me poor, crazy, an intruder. You asked me to serve food. You threw me out of my own house." She slowly turned, meeting every eye. "And all of that, because I wasn't wearing jewelry, because my dress was simple, because I didn't look like I belonged." Sarah tried to speak, her voice shaking. "Emily, I'm sorry. It was a huge misunderstanding. If we had known who you were—" "If you had known who I was," Emily interrupted, steady, "you would have treated me like a queen. But since you didn't, you treated me like trash. And that says far more about you than it does about me." Sarah went silent. Ethan took a shaky step forward. "Emily, my company. We really need you. This was all a mistake. I was immature. I deeply regret it." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "You regret it now, because you saw my name behind the contract that could save your business. But when you thought I was nobody, you treated me like nothing, and I don't invest in people who only know how to smile at a crown." Another businessman tried to step forward. "Please, Miss Moore, I wrote down every name," she said, cutting him off. "Every face, every action. I came here to observe, and I saw everything, heard everything, remembered everything." She turned to George. "But I also wrote down the names of those who didn't need to know mine, to show me respect, who stood up for what was right, even when it offered them nothing in return." George looked surprised. His eyes welled up. "Mr. George," Emily said, raising her voice so all could hear, "you are the one I want to invest in. Your company will get everything it needs to grow because you didn't sell your soul for a contract." The room erupted in shock. Some businessmen closed their eyes, others wept silently. Sarah collapsed into a chair, drained of all strength. "As for the rest of you," Emily continued, "don't bother trying to win me over, because you've already been dismissed." Michael nodded, proud. George fought back tears. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Just say the truth," Emily replied, "because that's what this place has been missing all along." Emily turned her back to the ballroom and walked toward the garden. As she crossed the threshold, the wind picked up, as if clearing the air, and the people stood frozen, witnesses to what would forever be remembered as the night when money lost and character won. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable night. The mansion, once a symbol of excess and hypocrisy, now pulsed with new life. Where fake smiles once reigned, genuine laughter echoed. The grand halls that had witnessed cruelty were now filled with meetings of young entrepreneurs, artists, and rising talents, people who would never have stepped foot in that place before. Emily walked through the corridors with ease. The floors were still marble, the chandeliers still sparkled, but the atmosphere had changed. She hadn't turned the house into a museum for the elite. She had transformed it into a hub for innovation and social impact. Where champagne once flowed, opportunity was now being served. George now led one of the main projects. His small, sustainable fabric factory had structure, visibility, and a full team working alongside him. "Miss Moore gave me more than funding," he said during a press event in the main ballroom. "She gave me trust, respect, and the chance to prove that integrity is also a form of investment." Emily watched from a distance, her eyes smiling in silence. In the garden, children ran across the lawn that once knew only designer heels. Local youth attended workshops, lectures, and learned about leadership, technology, and sustainability. Michael, now promoted to Chief Director of the Moore Foundation, walked over to her. "This house is finally breathing what it was always meant to." And the names on the doors?" Emily asked with an enigmatic smile. "The same," he said, "but now only the right ones are on them." Outside, Sarah drove past and saw a large banner showing Emily and George smiling side by side. The radio played a news story about the new entrepreneurship center at the Moore estate. She turned the volume down. The shame was still fresh. Ethan, now bankrupt, was begging for funding on online forums. He tried calling Emily one last time. She never answered. Meanwhile, Emily sat in the garden at sunset writing in her notebook. Next to her, a sign read, "Only those who can step outside themselves to see others are welcome here." Emily Moore. George arrived with 2 cups of tea. "Ready for the next idea?" he asked. "Always," she replied, "but this time with the right people by my side." The sun set behind the mansion's tall columns. It was the same place, but now a different time, a new story. A new world, born from respect, pain, truth, and choice. Emily never needed revenge. She just had to survive with grace until the day she could choose who was worthy of staying in her life. And that is the rarest kind of victory there is.